Hey everybody, this is video 15 and we are in our skeletal system unit. Today we're going to take a look at one of the major roles of your skeletal system, which is monitoring and managing the amount of calcium that you have in your blood. So we're going to learn a little bit about feedback systems, and we're also going to learn about how this applies to when you break a bone, how your body goes about healing it. So you may remember from biology, there are two feedback systems that are used in order to help you maintain homeostasis. The first is negative. Now, negative feedback systems are by far the most common that you have in the body. And what happens, negative feedback mechanisms kick in when you are outside of homeostasis so that it returns you back to normal. So I always remember just the two ends, negative and normal. When you are in negative feedback, it's trying to get you back to your normal levels. So, for example, if something is too high in your body, your temperature is too high, negative feedback kicks in, wants to return you back to your 37 degrees Celsius. In the case of body temperature, if you're too hot, you're going to sweat. And then as that sweat evaporates off your skin, that cools you off, returns you back to normal. Works in the other direction. If your body is too cold, you're going to shiver, your muscles are going to spasm. That's going to generate heat, which is going to return your body back to 37 degrees Celsius for your body temperature. Another example, when your blood sugar is too low, we'll get into this during our digestive system, but you'll have a hormone being released that results in glucagon, which is a type of sugar stored in the liver being released. Your liver is putting sugar into your blood, and that is going to raise your blood sugar back up. Positive feedback is a little bit different. In fact, there's only really two good examples of positive feedback in the human body, but it occurs when something is too high or too low, and it makes it become even higher or even lower. So it's pushing you further away from homeostasis. One of the examples is during labor. Oxytocin is a hormone that actually causes the cervix to contract. And as those contractions are happening, the head of the fetus is putting pressure on the cervix. When the cervix feels that pressure, it responds by causing more oxytocin to be released. And as we just saw, oxytocin causes the cervix to contract. More contractions mean more pressure, mean more oxytocin. More oxytocin, more contractions, more pressure, more oxytocin. So what it's doing, it's increasing the pressure, it's increasing contractions, it's pushing you further and further and further outside of homeostasis. So that is why it's an example of positive feedback. When it comes to calcium, your bones are made of kind of a matrix, a whole bunch of calcium phosphate. Calcium is the main component in this. It's what we usually think of. Calcium is also very, very important for your muscles and for being present in your blood. When we go over the muscular system next, we'll learn the role that calcium actually plays. So your bones are a storage bin of calcium. They are extra stores of calcium can be placed there, but it's also you need that calcium in order to have strong bones. The normal blood levels of calcium are around 10 milligrams per deciliter. So that kind of gives us where we should be when we test our blood. There's going to be two cells that are responsible for taking care of your bones and making sure that your blood calcium stays at the right level. Now, these two cells don't sense that your blood is at the right level, but they are the ones that go and get the job done whenever they're told, hey, our blood calcium levels are too high, or our blood calcium levels are too low. And those are going to be osteoblasts and osteoclasts. Like I said, they're primarily used to maintain homeostatic blood calcium levels, although after we look at the feedback mechanism, we will see how they play a role in healing a broken bone. So when you have low blood calcium, meaning the calcium in your blood is low, osteoclasts are going to kind of kick into overdrive. Now, osteoclasts, their job is to pull calcium out of your bones. So that's the way we term it so that we can remember osteoclasts collect calcium. So what they're doing is they're going to be moving along your bones, and they're going to be pulling calcium off of your bones. They get stimulated by parathyroid hormone, which is secreted by the parathyroid gland, which actually sits over by your Adam's apple. You have the thyroid gland, and then on the posterior side, you have two tiny little dots, really, that make up your parathyroid gland. But your body senses that blood calcium levels are too low. That parathyroid gland is going to release parathyroid hormone. That parathyroid hormone is going to stimulate those osteoclasts to begin pulling a whole bunch of calcium off of your bones. As those osteoclasts are pulling calcium off of your bones, they are releasing it into your bloodstream. So your blood calcium levels were too low, and they are going to raise your blood calcium levels back to normal. But it is at the expense of the calcium that you had on your bones. So if you're at low blood calcium levels for too long, you'll end up with very weak bones because you've been stealing all that calcium off of your bones. Your muscles won't work really well. There's going to be a whole cascade of effects. When you have really high blood calcium, you're going to have osteoblasts kick into overdrive. So osteoblasts build bones. That's how we remember them. But your thyroid hormone, or your thyroid gland, remember where those parathyroid glands are sitting on. When your blood calcium levels are too high, you're going to sense that, and your thyroid gland is going to secrete a hormone called calcitonin into the blood. That calcitonin basically does the opposite of parathyroid hormone. It's going to stimulate your osteoblasts to kick into overdrive, and what they're going to do is pull calcium out of your blood, because remember, that's the problem. There's too much calcium in our blood, and it's going to deposit it onto our bones. Oops, I'll go back here. So it pulls that calcium out of our bones, or out of our blood, deposits it on our bones. Our bones end up being stronger, and we stay in our homeostatic blood calcium levels. So here's another way to look at it. We call this kind of the seesaw method here. So normally you're at a 10 milligram per deciliter blood calcium level. If it gets too high, your thyroid gland kicks in, releases calcitonin. That calcitonin is going to stimulate osteoblasts to build bone, to pull it out of your blood. Blood calcium levels fall back to their normal rate. For some reason, if your blood calcium levels are too low, your parathyroid gland releases PTH, parathyroid hormone. That PTH is going to cause the osteoclasts to pull calcium off of your bones and return it back to homeostatic levels. So I know I said the same thing twice, both in bullet point form and picture form, but I hope that at least having both of these helped it to be able to stick. When we talk about healing broken bones, and we'll go over broken bones actually in our next lecture, there's quite a serious process that your body goes through. It's a pretty traumatic experience that your body needs to overcome to rebuild that bone. So obviously when you have a broken bone, you have a number of blood vessels that are supplying nourishment to that bone. It's going to bleed very heavily. And so you're going to end up with a lot of swelling. And what you're going to get is a hematoma, basically just a whole bunch of blood around wherever that fracture was. That extra blood is going to help promote healing. You have plenty of nutrients, you have plenty of osteoclasts, you have plenty of osteoblasts in the area that you're going to need for this process. Your osteoclasts are going to be looking for any sort of fragments or kind of broken off or maybe some sharp edges to that bone, and what it's going to try to do, it's going to try to smooth it down. Now there's a whole other process with cartilage and everything being deposited around here. We won't get too much into that. But the osteoclasts are going to basically clean up any sort of bone bits or shards or pointed edges that there might be. Think of it as they're just kind of ripping all the old things out if you've ever remodeled a house. Then your osteoblasts are going to come in, they're going to lay down new bone. So there's going to be some cartilage, there's going to be some differentiation into bone cells, but the osteoblasts are then once everything, all the old has been pulled out, osteoblasts can go in and they're going to deposit new bone. Usually when you deposit that new bone, they're going to overproduce and they're going to form what's called a callus, which is basically just a thickened area of the bone where that break used to be. I mean, you can actually see this on x-rays not too long after the healing process has occurred. Eventually, though, that callus will kind of be torn down by osteoclasts and kind of return the bone back to generally the shape it was prior. So here it is in picture format. You can see that hematoma, all that blood collecting around here, all the callus and the cartilage and everything being formed here. You can see the callus on the edges, especially at the end where that fracture used to be. The osteoblasts have overproduced. Here's another picture you can see here where they had a rod all the way through. This looks like a femur if I had to guess. Yeah, I'm guessing a femur. But then as that bone was fixed, you can see everything was smoothed down. Eventually those osteoblasts come in and lay down a whole bunch of new bone. This is a very large callus for this bone, but obviously if you're breaking your femur, like I think this is here, that is a very big weight-bearing bone, something that you need a lot of extra protection to. Here's a little bit better view. This is actually a forearm. So this looks like it is a broken ulna. No, I think that's radius. One of the two. Anyways, but you can see that callus on the edge here from where that bone was broken. You can't really see where the fracture is anymore. That has been cleaned up and fixed, but you still have the callus along the outside, just where those osteoblasts overproduced. So that is a look at how your bones play a role in monitoring your blood calcium levels through a negative feedback system, and then how that plays a role in healing broken bones. Like I said, our next lecture is actually over the types of fractures that you get, so that's always a fun one, and I will warn you now, and I'll warn you in the next video. There is some actual pictures of fractures, so just make sure that you're heeding those warnings if you're somebody with a little bit of a uneasy stomach.